Russia and India circumvent sanctions and US dollar. India and Russia are significant players in the global crude oil market and are now conducting most of their businesses' transactions in currencies other than the dollar. India has decided to trade oil with Russia using the UAE dirham and Russian ruble. This will have major implications for the ongoing tensions in the Ukrainian conflict as it contributes to the decline in the use of the dollar as the international currency. Although the dollar's dominance has been challenged in the past, it has maintained its position as the universally recognized reserve currency. However, it appears things are now beginning to change. The US currency is starting to lose prominence on the world stage, as is evident in India's oil trade with Russia. Hello, and welcome to another video of Finance Sense, where we cover all the latest trends in the financial markets and the economy. Before we start, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment below if you enjoyed watching this video, and turn on the notification bell to keep posted. India, the third largest oil consumer in the world, currently sources the majority of its oil from Russia, which Europe has spurned as a result of its invasion of Ukraine that took place in February of last year. Russia and India have just disclosed that they will no longer be using the US dollar in their trades, breaking the currency's long-standing dominance in international trade. An online news outlet has been following information from experts who believe that the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are attempting to weaken the US dollar. On March 8, two reporters published an article in which they discussed India's oil transactions with Russia. According to the reporters, these agreements have caused a dent in the supremacy of the US dollar in the international oil trade. As per oil dealers and banking insiders, Indian importers are paying for Russian oil in non-US currencies, mainly the UAE dirham. These insiders claim that these transactions resulted in several $100 million in business transactions between the two countries during the previous 3 months. The insiders, who have first-hand knowledge of the events, chose to remain nameless in order to ward off any future retaliation. In the past, it has been reported that Russia provides oil to India at a steep discount. Many news outlets stated last year that the Russian oil price cap was about $60 per barrel. It has also been claimed that once oil is sold for a higher price, a significant quantity of oil ultimately winds up in gas stations across Europe. Moreover, several oil trade and banking insiders have reported that since the G7 group imposed a cap on Russian oil prices, Indian buyers have been paying for most of their oil imports from Russia using non-dollar currencies. These currencies include the United Arab Emirates dirham and the Russian ruble. According to three insiders, Dubai merchants and Russian energy corporations Gazprom and Rosneft are looking into receiving non-dollar payments for certain kinds of Russian oil, and these premium oil grades have been offered for sale at rates higher than the cap of $60 per barrel. As Russian sales to India make up such a small part of total sales, there was no breach of sanctions caused by these transactions. Non-Western services such as Russian shipping and insurance can also be utilized to circumvent the sanctions. Furthermore, as part of Moscow's efforts to de-dollarize its economy and evade sanctions, 3 Indian banks backed some transactions. Likewise, given the recent transactions imposed by the United States and the UK, it could become challenging to continue paying for Russian oil in dirhams. In addition to Moscow, the Abu Dhabi-based Russian bank MTS was added to the sanctions list. Similarly, this bank has supported non-dollar payments for Indian oil, although the majority of Russian banks have been subject to sanctions since the conflict. A source in the Indian refining sector claims that Indian buyers and Russian suppliers are still determined to continue trading Russian oil. According to the source, the Russian company's suppliers are actively looking for new banks to work with in order to get payments. The Indian government has not yet asked them to halt their imports of Russian oil. In the event that their present payment method is declined, they are certain they will be able to find another. For decades, the US dollar has been the de facto international currency for purchasing oil. However, data from SWIFT, or the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, reveals that only 40% of all international payments are made using this currency. Daniel Ahn, the former top economist for the United States Department of State and current global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, believes that the dollar's supremacy is unprecedented. But he also thinks thinks that even if the sanctions fail to meet their goals, they might still be harmful to the Western banking systems. Because of the sanctions and bans placed on Russia, the European Union has set a price ceiling for oil imported by sea. This was part of a bigger sanction on Russian oil shipments. Furthermore, nearly half of Russia's gold and foreign exchange reserves were frozen because the country was removed from the SWIFT global payment system. And now, Russia has said that it would only accept payments for its oil in currencies from nations it regards as friendly. Last year, they enforced this by demanding that unfriendly European countries pay for oil in rubles. Hence, regardless of whether they had breached any sanctions, Russian companies were still harmed since their payments were stopped or delayed. Alexandra Prokopenko, an independent analyst and former advisor to the Bank of Russia, stated that this made the dollar a toxic asset for these businesses. She also said that in order for Russia's economy to diversify away from its heavy reliance on oil and gas profits, it must immediately begin engaging in trade with the rest of the world. As a result, they are looking into all of the many opportunities available to them. They are presently working on creating a direct infrastructure that links Russia's and India's financial systems. The State Bank of India, India's largest bank, has a foreign exchange account in Moscow. And in order to ease trade, a significant number of Russian banks have opened accounts with Indian banks. Geeta Gopinath, the International Monetary Fund's deputy managing director, has said that sanctions on Russia might help boost smaller trading blocs that use alternative currencies, ultimately weakening the dollar's supremacy. She stated in an interview with the Financial Times that the dollar will continue to be the dominant global currency despite the changing market environment. She did, however, raise the possibility of fragmentation on a smaller scale. Additionally, the long-standing norms of dollar-dominated international trade are being weakened as a result of tensions between China and the West. In September, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared that they had chosen to trade gas supplies to China using yuan and rubles rather than dollars. This decision may have been influenced by the fact that Russia holds a portion of its currency reserves in yuan, while China has reduced its dollar holdings. On the other hand, India has surpassed Europe to become Russia's leading consumer of seaborne oil. According to the International Energy Agency in Paris, India increased its imports of Russian crude oil by 16 times since the conflict began, making up around one-third of its overall imports. Despite the fact that India does not recognize the sanctions imposed in Moscow, trade sources asserted that the majority of Indian oil imports from Russia adhere to the restrictions and that practically all transactions take place below the price cap. However, to avoid unintentionally breaking any international laws, the majority of banks and financial institutions are cautious while clearing payments. As per trade sources, Indian refiners have lately begun paying for some of their Russian oil imports with rubles. These payments were handled by the State Bank of India through its Russian Nostro account. The majority of these deals involve buying oil from Rosneft and Gazprom, two massive Russian energy companies. However, most of the dirham transactions have been processed by the Bank of Baroda and Axis Bank. In the event that more restrictions impact ruble transactions, sources indicate India has devised a framework for completing transactions with Russia in Indian rupees. On the other hand, the Secretary of the United States Treasury, Janet Yellen, is optimistic that the dollar will not face substantial competition for a considerable amount of time. Hi! We hope that watching this video was interesting and that you learned something valuable. If you enjoyed it, please hit the notification button, like, subscribe, and watch more of our videos. Also, don't forget to share your comments in the comment section below. This is Finance Sense, helping you stay current on all the most recent changes in the financial markets and economy. Stay safe and look out for the next video.